Tom Baker's 15th series as the Doctor for Big Finish Audios got off to an incredibly strong start a few months ago. Let's see if they can keep that up. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and today we're going to be reviewing Doctor Who, the 4th Doctor Adventures, Series 15, Lethal Progress. So a couple of months ago we reviewed the Ministry of Death, and this was an incredibly strong start to Series 15 of the 4th Doctor Adventures. The Ministry of Death by Robert Valentine just instantly shot up my rankings as one of the best 4th Doctor audios from Big Finish. Oh hi Winnie, do you like Tom Baker too? And the Inhuman Empire by Fillmore Ryan was fine, I just wish they hadn't have had 2 unit Earthbound stories back to back. But now, with Lethal Progress, we are going way deep into the universe, we are going spacefaring, we're going into the far future with a trilogy of stories. We have Green and Pleasant Planet by Tim Foley, we have The Continuum by John Dorney, and The Audience by Lizzie Hopley. All 3 of those are spacefaring sci-fi stories, there's not a historical one here. It seems that all of the historicals are being saved for the final box set of Series 15, A New Occupation, but we'll get to that later. All 3 of these stories are 2-part adventures, essentially hour-long audios, and we'll go through them in order, starting with Green and Pleasant Planet by Tim Foley. This takes place in the far future on a colony ship called the Britannia. The Doctor and Sarah Jane land on the Britannia just as they're making planetfall on a brand new alien world that has been untouched by humanity. And that's incredibly strange because when they land, they find model villages, model towns, model cities with little wooden figurines of people and animals, and it seems like humanity have already been here, but there's no human life on the planet. And what's more, these wooden figures are not only alive, they have a bloodlust, and the body count starts getting high. In scenes ripped straight out of Gulliver's Travels, it's up to the 4th Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith, played by Tom Baker and Sadie Miller respectively, to try and escape the planet with the colonizers and survive the onslaught of these little wooden malicious figures.
And how goes the hunt?
Oh, just past a family of badgers.
But no injured unicorn? Scott must have taken it. It'll be back on the ship.
Well, there are other possibilities if a local left their toys out.
Maybe they came back for them, and they wouldn't like Scott damaging them.
Or another crew member took it, a souvenir, a prize.
I'd stick with a postcard.
Oh, there's a third possibility, that the unicorn galloped away by itself.
How serious is that suggestion?
Oh, there are many forces that animate the inanimate. I don't feel them here, but then I'm not sure what I feel. I don't like this planet. It's giving me brain fog, and even the most pleasant of places hides the darkest of secrets.
Doctor!
Maybe they've started to reveal themselves. Quickly.
I love the premise of Green and Pleasant Planet. It's incredibly fun, and to Tim Foley's credit, there is some really strong characterization here that immediately just sort of ingratiates yourself with the supporting cast. You've got Captain Bradford, played by Orlando Gibbs, who's this unqualified, insufferable nepo baby who's trying to live up to his father's expectations. You've got Dr. Ulster, who is unappreciated by the crew, but kind of sticks around and tolerates the pretty bombastic and insufferable 4th Doctor because he seems to actually respect her. She's played by Nisha Nair, who you may remember as the female controller in Bad Wolf back in 2005. There's an older crew member who doesn't really last long in the story, but he's clearly experienced and he's very annoyed that this younger captain has just been placed here due to nepotism. Now, these character archetypes, these character arcs that we see unfold in the Green and Pleasant Planet, they're not, revolutionary, but they are effective character shorthand that Tim Foley often employs right out of the gate of his stories to give his characters like an immediate presence. But outside of that initial strong characterization and a really strong premise, I actually didn't really enjoy Green and Pleasant Planet too much. Like I said, it's an interesting idea, but I think it's a bit too concerned with forward momentum and keeping the energy of the story up, rather than letting that premise and the innate body horror that comes with it really settle. Half of the scene transitions in this story are either the Doctor and Sarah fleeing or falling into danger, or some sort of psychic energy that knocks out the Doctor and we metaphorically fade to black so that we can do a brief time skip. And I understand that Tim Foley may have done that to give the story a real sense of pace and energy, but rather than giving us a death-defying adventure, it just kind of ends up giving way to tedium and a real lack of place and focus. One set piece has the Doctor and Sarah Jane apparently falling off a cliff edge, but we get a solid 15 to 20 seconds of Tom Baker making wisecracks, presumably as they're falling, or maybe they're doing an over-the-top, like teetering over the cliff edge like Sonic the Hedgehog, like the entire time. Like, it's stuff like that really does break the immersion. I also think, really uncharacteristic from Big Finish, the audio production itself seems really compromised, and I've been reviewing Big Finish for several years, and I can barely recall a time in one of these reviews where I've actually said this didn't sound like a professional audio production. Some of the cast members are recording with less than ideal microphones, as this was done during the COVID lockdowns. However, I've heard loads of stories from Big Finish that were recorded during the COVID lockdowns, and I never noticed the microphone quality discrepancy quite like I did with this story. At first, I thought that this might have been like really early days lockdown, when Big Finish was scrambling to make this work. But no, according to the Big Finish website, this was recorded in spring 2021, so they'd been doing multiple COVID productions with the Fourth Doctor. It just really stood out here for me. There's also a few fundamentals, like sometimes sound effects would completely overwhelm the dialogue. Some characters who are shouting over a distance, but they're meant to still be legible, are just way too quiet, and then some ambient sound effects feel like they just kicked in way too early so that the characters in the scene didn't pick up on them early enough to be credible for the scene. There's also what seems to be a generic lion roaring sound effect for one of the threats, which I'm guessing, just with no evidence, I've got to confess, I'm just guessing that was meant to be a placeholder for like an early draft of the recording, but it was never swapped out, because the creature that's threatening them should bear no resemblance at all to a basic Earth lion. Like, I don't know how that happened. I will say though, Jamie Robertson's music, really good. I liked his music throughout all of the box set, but in this story it did really stand out. I really liked his music here. It's not an irredeemable story. I think that there are some interesting themes here of the inability for colonialism to hold through the generations as complacency and incompetence inevitably kicks in. I also did just love the idea of the main threat of the story being these little wooden figurines. I kind of visualized like the wooden humans from classic Thomas the Tank Engine stories. But while Green and Pleasant Planet had a really good starting idea, I think the setting and the pacing struggles to really allow it to leave the starting gate and just become a fully fledged story. It's just a really cool premise, and it doesn't really get beyond that, and that's even like not even considering the really amateur hour like sound design here. Like, I don't know, it sounds like despite being recorded over 5 years ago, it wasn't quite finished. Next up we have The Continuum by John Dorney, and this has the Doctor and Sarah land on the space station Daedalus on a historic day in mankind's history, because humanity has just made its first hyperspace journey. Mina, who is the Hypernaut, played by Lucy Goldie, has gone into hyperspace for the first time in human history. However, when she returns, she's accidentally brought something back with her. And this threat is something that's so horrifying, so unspeakably scary, that whoever makes contact with Mina immediately commits suicide and tries to kill everyone around them as well. It's up to the Doctor and Sarah and the few remaining crew members of the Daedalus after the dust has started to settle upon Mina's arrival to figure out what has Mina brought back with her, how can it be stopped, and what is going on in hyperspace.
You wish to end your life in fear?
I'd rather not end it at all if it's all the same to you, but beggars can't be choosers, can I?
The Continuum.
That's your name. Oh, a bit pretentious, isn't it? I much prefer Mina.
Mina died long ago. Screaming. The journey through hyperspace was by no means as instantaneous as it appeared. The things she saw. The things she felt.
Ah, and one of them was you?
The Continuum exists outside time. It has always lived. It will always live.
Nothing lasts forever.
It is a creature of chaos and despair that you will come to know very soon.
Oh, I think I'm all right, thanks.
All will know the Continuum eventually.
So that's why you want off this station. You want to trap more victims.
You are not worthy of further explanation.
Hello? 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 Oh, she's hung up. Not even a word of goodbye.
When I listened to The Continuum, I thought, it's a decent but bog-standard space station slasher story. But then afterwards I listened to the behind the scenes, the making of interviews at the end of the story, and it turns out that John Dorney was intending for The Continuum to be a sort of one-take story, similar to films like Birdman or 1917 or Rope, where there's no cuts or jumps, we go from one scene to the other in a linear direct fashion without any sort of time skips or proper transitions, with everything taking place in real time. And that's a really cool idea, but I'm so sorry, I didn't even notice when listening to The Continuum, and not in a, oh, it did its job so well, I didn't even notice. No, it was in execution, this was just formatted and presented like almost any other hour of audio. Like, you could have formatted Green and Pleasant Planet or The Audience later on in this box set exactly the same way, and with the exception of maybe a couple of scene transitions, I wouldn't have noticed a difference. And that sounds a bit mean, but I apologise. My experience of listening to The Continuum was the experience that I had. On reflection, yeah, you think about the story, and every so often you may notice that one character leaves one room and then we follow them into the lift, and then they talk to another character on the intercom in the lift, and then they walk out of the lift, go into it. Yes, okay, you kind of notice that sort of propulsive energy every so often, but really the main difference between The Continuum and almost any other Fourth Doctor audio, or almost any other Doctor Who audio in recent memory, is that we follow the characters in staircases and lifts way more often than normal, and I don't think that in and of itself necessarily makes for a good Doctor Who story, or even an immersive Doctor Who story. It's a noble endeavour, but come to think of it, didn't Tim Foley try something very similar in a War Master story a couple of years ago? Yeah, I remember now, nearly 3 years ago, Tim Foley did this in runtime. He said that the film 1917 was the direct inspiration for that, and I thought that did a much better job of trying to be a one-take story than The Continuum did. Like, not to try and pit writers against each other, but I felt it. I felt that structure change in runtime, whereas here in The Continuum, I didn't feel it at all. But outside of that primary gimmick, was The Continuum any good? Yeah, it was alright. I think that the first part of the story is the most interesting one. I think that part 2, the pacing really does sort of grind to a halt as it just becomes a series of conversations between the Fourth Doctor and whatever has possessed Mina over computer monitors. And we're 2 stories into this box set, Green and Pleasant Planet and The Continuum, and Sarah Jane has done nothing other than hold down a very heavy lever in The Continuum. Like, these 2 stories they're not good Sarah Jane stories. She has basically nothing to do in either of them. I think the idea of an existential cosmic horror that drives people to suicide in hyperspace, it's a cool idea, but the idea of some sort of cosmic Cthulhu-esque entity was done way better in Merlin's Trap by Hannah Kennedy in the Sea Smoke Halloween box set last year. I understand that due to release schedules and recording dates and stuff, Sea Smoke was recorded way after Lethal Progress was, but the release schedule is what it is. I can only work with what I'm given here. And lastly, in the Lethal Progress box set, we have The Audience by Lizzie Hopley, and this has the Fourth Doctor and Sarah land on Gakoria, a planet that seems to be predominantly made up of these synthoid-like cyborg creatures, and a handful of humanoids, the Gakorians, who are putting on plays, are putting on performances for these synthoids in this auditorium. Because it turns out that the Gakorians, they created these synthoids, and the artificial intelligence went out of control, basically genocided the people, but they weren't able to perfect art. They weren't able to perfect authentic dramatic emotion, so they're essentially using what remains of the Gakorians to put on these plays and put on these shows under threat of death to try and absorb the information and absorb the emotion and the authenticity from these performances. And if they don't like the performances, the people die, and Sarah Jane unwittingly gets involved in the artistic troupe, and her mind is scanned by one of the synthoids, which sees that this black and white Joan of Arc movie from her childhood left a big impression on her, so they're going to try and have her recreate it with the death and all.
Now get down before I drag you. I'm not losing anyone else today.
How many exits are there?
Enough!
Oh, get off! I don't know what's happening here, unless you enjoy being a gladiator in an arena of synthoids.
You think we haven't thought of every single way of stopping this nightmare? Look at the troupe. Down here you survive and you prepare for out there,
On stage.
where you do your best work. You give them truth and nothing less, or they don't learn.
Truth.
Our best stories, our best speeches, comedy, tragedy, anything and everything you can remember, because they soak it up and they hate repetition.
And it just goes on and on.
Yes, and you'd better come up with something because we're running out.
I'm aware that I've been pretty negative about the Lethal Progress box set during this review, but the audience does bring it back at the end. I thought this was a really strong hour of audio. I think Lizzie Hopley did a really terrific job here, even from just the opening scene, the cold open, where you got these actors performing, like, and they just losing the will to live as they look into the audience and they just see these cold, blank synthoid stares, like just looking right back at them, giving them nothing to work with as performers, but they know that if they don't please this audience, then they're gonna be killed. Like, it was a really creepy cold open, and the actors played it really well. The audience is a little bit the face of evil, a little bit Bad Wolf, a little bit the girl in the fireplace. It's surprisingly grisly. Philip Hinchcliffe would have been really proud to broadcast this one, but I don't think they would have ever gotten away with the body horror on display in the 1970s, not on TV. This is unbroadcastable. You've got a really strong central villainous performance from Dawn Murphy, who plays Thalia, who's this AI who's basically in charge of the synthoids, but one of the standouts here is this character on the cover, this synthoid called Melpo, played by Homer Todiwala, who is basically the most advanced synthoid on the planet. They're Thalia's greatest creation, and they don't quite know if they're human or not, and they've absorbed so much emotional authenticity and so many true-to-life experiences that even they don't quite know where they are here. And I think that the scenes with Tom Baker and Homer Todiwala are some of the standout conversation scenes of the whole box set. I think it's a really strong dynamic, and Melpo's arc is surprisingly compelling. I know that this story was recorded years ago in lockdown and like pre-generative AI, but listening to the audience, my mind did go to the idea of these companies that are just stealing and gobbling up text and media and information and just feeding it to these AI models just to make them learn, which is just a huge like disrespect and cultural vandalism of the art that's being co-opted. And I think that the audience is dealing with a similar idea that has actually transpired in reality just a few years after recording it. Just the idea of, oh, just one more text, just one more bit of theft, and then we'll finally have the perfect AI model. And that sort of desperation in pursuit of perfection, of a better artificial intelligence, is the main drama at the heart of the audience. And it's interesting that this was recorded over 5 years ago, and it's sort of manifested in real life. Like, the week that I'm recording this, we've got news stories about AI companies literally destroying books to feed into AI algorithms, and if you destroy the book, then it's technically like not copyright infringement. Like it's sort of this idea of just consuming but not understanding or contextualizing. And after 2 stories where Sadie Miller's Sarah Jane Smith gets dick all to do, in the audience, she finally steps up to the plate. It's great having Sarah Jane actually do something in a story, starting a revolution amongst the artistic troupe by channeling more Bertolt Brecht than Stanislavski. Lizzie Hopley has a theatre background, and that knowledge and that love for the form really comes across in the audience. This does feel like the type of script that could only be written by a unabashed theatre nerd, and that's really brilliant. The audience was a really strong closing closer to this box set. It's got great grisly scares, some really authentic humanity underneath it despite the premise of the Synthoids, and really strong performances across the board. I thought that the audience was just a really exceptionally strong story in Series 15. It's probably my second favourite of the series so far, behind The Ministry of Death. But does it salvage the box set overall, though? I don't know. I don't think it does. Like, 1 out of 3, that's quite a steep cost for a box set like this. Obviously, Fourth Doctor Big Finish completionists are going to be diving into this and listening to all of the stories, but if this was a case of you could only, like, buy these one at a time, I'd say skip these two and go straight to the audience, but that's not how these releases work, unfortunately. As a box set in and of itself, I don't know if I can recommend it. But in terms of just what I heard and the quality of the stories themselves, decent ideas, decent premises that I'm really kind of let down by the execution. But the audience is just like a late in the game home run. We've got another Fourth Doctor Series 15 box set coming out in September. We've got 2 stories here. We've got Daughter of Destruction by Catherine Armitage and A New Occupation by Helen Goldwyn. These are the historicals of the series, following a box set that takes place entirely in the future and in space, and also the first box set, Ministry of Death, which is entirely Earthbound contemporary day unit. So I'm glad that we're getting some variety from this series of Fourth Doctor adventures, but even though I do find myself gravitating more towards the futuristic spacefaring stories, this box set, with the exception of the audience, was a bit of a slog. But hey, the cover's great. That is like a top tier Sarah Jane Smith outfit. And that's my review of Doctor Who The Fourth Doctor Adventures Series 15 Lethal Progress. I want to know your thoughts about the box set in the comment section below. Hit the like button because it really helps me out. Subscribe for more Doctor Who Big Finish reviews. And folks, I'll see you all next time.